I would love to start by having Cindy and Emily describe a bit about their own career paths. So Cindy, how about you start off?
Sure. So I've worked in upstate New York pretty much my entire career. I started at GE and did a year there and did a few years at Target Distribution Center. I spent several years at the VA and did a short stint at a nonprofit in Glens Falls. And then I've landed at ACO, so a Goldman Sachs company. So and that's where I presently am as a financial planner.
Right. And you didn't start at ACO as a financial planner either.
No, I was the director of staffing and made a total pivot and decided to make a total career change March of this year, right before shutdown. And and like Janine said, I'm betting on myself. So decided to start as a financial planner with the hopes of becoming an advisor one day.
That's great. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I'm from upstate New York, and then I started off my career actually in Tampa, Florida. I did direct sales, so I was that person that like everyone avoided in like Walmart and Costco's, where I try to sell you like a hair straightener or like weight loss supplements. I did that for a year. That was a tough job, but I ended up moving back up here, and then I did all the business development for a global tenant representation firm, and I've been, I'll talk more about it, but I've been kind of trying to figure out where I want it to be. And now I'm actually a full-time residential real estate agent. So with Berkshire Hathaway.
That's great. Yeah. Betting on yourself is going to play a big role in our conversation. And I hope that our audience really connects with what Cindy and Emily are going to say. But when we think about the title of the summit, Success on Our Terms, for each of you, how do you define success when it comes to your professional lives? Because you've each had kind of a varied career, let's say.
Yeah, I can go first. For me, success, and this is just something that I've learned, it's when you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? And what I mean by that is, are you excited about your day? Are you looking forward to your day? Are you looking forward to work and what you got going on? I mean, we all have those days where you're just like, no, you're just not in the mood for anything. But overall, are you excited? Because I know what it feels like to wake up and not be excited. And you're at work 8 hours of your day. So it's just a draining feeling. So, I mean, if you're waking up and you're excited and you love what you do, I think that's beyond successful right there.
That's great.
So for me, it's always, am I being challenged? Mentally, from a personal development standpoint, and that is how I feel successful. If I can kind of point to when I started in a role where I am now, and I can see a clear kind of like progress along the way that I've grown in my role. I've grown as a person. I've learned things. I've made mistakes and learned from them as well. But for me, it's always, am I being challenged in a certain way? And if I'm not, then I know it's time to move on.
And I think with each of those, the personal passion of what you're doing and are you being challenged? I mean, both of you had, like I said before, varied careers. Cindy, you started in HR and now you are working toward becoming a financial analyst. And Emily, you've had a gradual flow from public relations and now you're with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. But you each have that kind of defining term for success, or that defining feeling. So would you say that is your kind of guiding principle when you are looking at a possible new opportunity for a job or a new opportunity within your jobs right now? Is that a guiding principle?
I can go. Yeah, for me, absolutely. I tend to be a little bit of a restless person. So, and if I'm feeling bored or if I'm feeling like I'm hitting up against a wall at like certain point in my career, then I start kind of searching for the next challenge, the next opportunity to grow in a different way. Sometimes I've had to seek those out and sometimes those have been handed to me. But absolutely, I know that's my big sign is I feel bored.
Yeah, I mean, you can just feel it in your gut when you know there's a time to make a change. I mean, and that can be within your organization or like for me with COVID, like pre-COVID, I was always on the run. I was always at events. I was running to my office. I was at every coffee shop under the sun. And I even like, if you wear like heels, like that little rubber piece that like wears down and like the metal sticks out and then you're clinking everywhere, which by the way, I found out you can just buy those little rubber pieces. I've been buying new heels every single time that happens. So that was a waste of money. No, I mean, with COVID, so when everything shut down, I was home all the time and I was just like, oh, you know, I was starting to get these feelings and I'm like, what's going on? And like, people are like, those are feelings. Those are, you know, things that you've been suppressing for quite some time. Like they're starting to come up. And like, I was just finally, you know, sometimes I think it takes courage to acknowledge them and then say to yourself, okay, so I'm not happy here, but you know, what's the next step and what am I going to do? So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like COVID became a reckoning for a lot of people when it came to their professional lives and what they are spending, you know, 8 to 10 or 12 hours a day doing when they're at home.
Absolutely.
For sure. So let's talk about this idea of claiming your space. I feel like some folks on this call might think claiming your space is kind of an entrepreneur's gig. It is literally creating your own space. It is getting a storefront. It is really making your own name in brick and mortar. But both of you come at that from a different angle. So I'd love to talk about the idea of claiming your space and how you feel you've done that with your professional lives. So Cindy, how about you go first?
Sure. You know, for me, it started, I feel like when I started really kind of feeling like I needed to kind of find a job that fit and also be very intentional about looking for the type of job and organization that I was going to land in next with the birth of my daughter. So she's 11 now, and, you know, I've been a single mother for most of her life. And I've made that very clear from like the beginning of like the interview that, you know, being a single mother requires me to work a certain type of hour, type of day. And you know, while I'm actually at work, I will work my butt off for it. But, you know, my daughter is always my first priority. And I've always been very clear about that. And I feel like letting that be known lets the organization know, like, well, maybe that's not the right fit for us, but at least like, I don't have to try to fit that in afterwards. And then I've also taken the approach whenever I land in a role, you know, there's always what my predecessor has done in the past. So I take a look at that and I want to be respectful of that. But then the next point is, how do I want to make it my own? Like what kind of changes do I want to implement down the road? And for me, that's kind of taking some time to watch and observe and then starting to kind of implement those changes along the way. So I think I take a twofold approach to those things.
Yeah. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to work for myself, and for the longest time I just didn't know what that was. And then when I got into real estate, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. But you know, real estate's 100% commission, and I have student loans to pay and other things to pay for, so I couldn't just leap into it and be like, let's do it. So actually for a few years now, I've been balancing 2 jobs. I've been doing you know, my day job, and then I do night and weekends, and I do real estate. And when COVID hit, I just saw this as an opportunity. To Janine's point, I was like taking handfuls out of the jar here, the confidence jar. And I'm like, I'm just going to give it my all with real estate. Like during COVID, this is my time. And I just put, you know, pedal to the metal. And, you know, sometimes it's uncomfortable to promote yourself. And I know that maybe to some that sounds weird, but sometimes like we second guess, like, oh gosh, should I really post this? Do I sound too cocky? Do I look too desperate? Do I like, you know, and it's funny. It's like, you should want to promote yourself and your business and what you're doing and what you're up to. So I just went all in during COVID with my real estate. And now I was able to now just work for myself. So I was able to achieve that goal. But I mean, it took a few years and lots of nights and weekends to make that happen. So
I love talking about this idea of confidence and what role confidence plays in claiming your space and making you feel comfortable in the space that you're occupying. And each of you have occupied different spaces. So how have you developed that confidence to know where you wanted to go next, and the confidence to either stick it out when you needed to, or to say, nope, done, got to find something else? So how do you cultivate that confidence?
Cindy, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think for me, and I think very early on in my career, I didn't have a lot of confidence. I really didn't know what was going on. Like I like to say, like my first job, I like really had no idea what was going on. And, you know, it's kind of a mess, but I think that's kind of a function sometimes of a first job, to kind of figure yourself out. And I spent the early part of my career pretty timid and like kind of scared to be myself. And I think it really kind of, a light bulb came on to me. I had spent a year going to a meeting, and every week I'd be silent. And I was like, I don't want to be that weird silent person anymore. I'm going to force myself to say something. And from that day on, I would just ask a question. And from there, you know, it would build, and like people didn't like scream at me when I asked a question. And I felt like I had some input, and it was a slow build. And now you can't get me to shut up at meetings. But, you know, this has been like a 14-year career progression to get me to that point. So I don't think I would have made those choices in my career now that I would have at 22 when I started working, that I could bet on myself, because I've shown myself that I will land on my feet every time. I've been through really tough career situations, and it's been fine not during it. Like it's, you know, I've had definitely crisis of confidences many times, but after it, I see, okay, I got through that, and I'm fine, and I'm better. So I think it's giving yourself time to grow too.
Yeah. You know, for me, you know, Sarah asked the other day, like, you know, how are you so confident now? And like, to be honest, like I still get like that little voice that says like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. Or, you know, the voice of maybe somewhat reasoning, trying to talk you down to whatever scares you. But for me, I'm a huge reader. So I love business books. I love reading about people's stories and how they got to where they are today. So something that really helped me, there's a book called Everything's Figure Outable. Really good book. But there was a little segment in the book that I really liked, and it talked about being a perfectionist. And before I read that book, like during interviews, when people asked like, Nate, you know, tell me something good about yourself, and I'd be like, I'm a perfectionist. And I thought that was like brag worthy. But really, the book explains how that's actually a bad thing. And it's bad because we're constantly trying to achieve something that's not achievable, right? So you try to have the perfect career, the perfect home life, the perfect image, you know, whatever it is, you're constantly trying to do something that's not real. And that just makes you go crazy. And actually people who are perfectionists have a higher chance of having depression, anxiety, eating disorders, all these things. So when I'm being too hard on myself, I kind of like take a step back. I say, okay, am I being a perfectionist, or am I being realistic here? You know, am I being too hard on myself, or am I just chickening myself out? Or am I just, you know, it's just something. So that's something that's really helped me. And then honestly, like, when you make big changes, they're really hard, but when you realize that you're still in all one piece and everything's okay, it gets more comfortable for you. So
can I just add one more thing that has led to absolutely my confidence, is getting really tough feedback along the way in my career. I mean, tough to the point where, you know, I'll leave and cry in my office by myself. But in the end, there's always some truth in there. And I've always used that as an opportunity to kind of look at myself and see what can I change and what do I need to address. So I appreciate all those people who gave me that tough feedback, even though it was definitely not always easy or fun to hear.
That's true. And I think that kind of plays into a term that Emily had used in our previous conversations, the circle of influencers in your lives. So when it comes to people, your mentors, or maybe your supervisor who's giving you that tough feedback, or your family, when it comes to those people who are influencing your professional lives, and it can really be anybody, but how important is listening to their voices when it comes to you both making decisions about, you know, what's your next step? How are you going to claim your space?
Circle of influence. I'm all about circle of influence. And admittedly, that took me a few years to really build like a solid circle of people that I was content with. And what I mean by that is like, people are always changing, we're always growing. And sometimes, you know, maybe someone like your friend from high school, you just eventually outgrow them. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them as much as you did then. It's just, we outgrow people, and we're constantly changing. So you want to be around people that are constantly challenging you in a good way. and who are encouraging you when you're like, I think I want to take this leap, but like I'm really nervous too. And they encourage you to do that. I just got I know she's on here somewhere. I just got coffee with Margot, and she's awesome. You know, she was totally stoked when I said, I'm finally working for myself. Like I'm doing it. I'm scared. Oh my gosh. And she's like, I think that's great. Like, you know, like how else can I help you? You know, like, and that's everything to me. So yeah.
I think from my like early career, I would say up until like the past 5 years or so, I would say the way the people influencing you were the ones that I had the hardest time working for. Some like really tough bosses, toxic, and I would learn from them as like ways I did not want to be, ways I did not want to operate as a person in an organization. And I really took those as lessons. And then I feel like more recently, you know, I never had people looking out for me in my career up until recently. And it's been incredible. Like I always used to be like, well, why can't I have someone helping me along the way? And I just had to help myself, which I think made me a lot stronger actually. And like that I could bet on myself at this point. So now I have a circle of influence, but I feel like mostly I just listen to myself, like my inner voice and what I think is the right thing to do. Like I don't think I've really ever kind of led myself astray when it came down to the really important decisions. So I think that's been the most important thing, is really just paying attention to kind of that inner voice.
I would love to get advice from you on that inner voice.
And can I just add one other thing? That's something that's really great about the Capital Region. There's so many women, leaders, anyone. If you just reach out to them and you say, hey, listen, like I think you're really great and I would love to sit down with you virtually or, you know, whatever, and just pick at your brain and learn some things and ask you some questions. 9 times out of 10, I've been told yes. Women that never met me, that are just in a leadership role that I just admire from a distance. And I'm like, man, they're so awesome. I would love to know how she handles leadership or, you know, whatever it is. It's just 9 times out of 10, if you ask any of these ladies on this call, they're probably going to say yes. Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And we do have a question in the chat, and I'd remind everyone, if you have a question, please feel free, type it in the chat. This one's from Sherry Finkel Murphy, who is along the lines of what exactly we're talking about. She asks, do you have mentors? Who are they to you, and how did you acquire them? I feel like we've touched a little bit on that, but I'd love to hear each of you on that.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, some of them I've just reached out to via email, LinkedIn, and I'm just very honest. On panels, there's so many women I see speak on panels, and I'm like, wow, they are so cool. Like, I just want to get to know them, and I'll just message them and say, hey, would you be willing to have a 30-minute discussion with me? I would love to ask you some questions as I'm growing in my career. And most of the times they're going to say yes. So that's a lot of how I got my mentors. Forced, kind of.
I love that, because I had the same approach, and that's why I have mentors now. Because I started my first mentor, and I don't know if she's on, but Ansel, I definitely hold near and dear to my heart. I went up to her after a Women at Work event, and I knew she was working in Glens Falls, and I asked to have lunch with her. And you know, with like maybe her saying no, I think people have to just be okay with that risk, and like, because it's usually going to pay out. Like Emily said, most people are just very flattered that you want to get to know them. And I think that's the same way I've developed my mentor at work, is I just asked her to meet. And I think it's just taking that like kind of step over that initial hurdle that feels like maybe sometimes a little intimidating to people, but it's so worth it. But I think the other step is keeping at it. Like, so I don't necessarily expect them to maybe keep in touch with me, especially early on in the relationship. It's me being kind of like proactive, persistent, not annoying, but just knowing that I'm going to reach out to them on a regular basis, and just saying, you know, like, hey, I know we met like 2 months ago. Would love to meet again. And, you know, my mentor at work has actually said, like, you are the most proactive person I've ever met, because you just keep reaching out to me. And, you know, I'm kind of like an annoying gnat. No. But I think she's appreciated that. She's seen that, like, my persistence and, like, kind of just that relationship is important to me, and she can tell.
That's great. That's great. Well, and speaking about work, you know, during the coronavirus at some point, Cindy, for you, it was more in the beginning in March, and Emily, it's been very recently. You've taken on new positions. So how have you kind of held on to your priorities, taking on a new position during a global pandemic with your new, I guess, with your new jobs?
Cindy, did you want to go first, or?
Yeah, so I feel lucky. My daughter is a little older. So we were able to kind of manage through the shutdown with her not being able to go to school. My organization, ACO and Goldman Sachs, they've been wonderful through this whole thing. Just absolutely astounding, like how supportive they have been with supporting their workers, making sure they feel comfortable. People have been recently going back to work, but absolutely as flexible as they can be. So I've appreciated that. And, I feel like starting a new job and then 3 weeks later having a shutdown is not like ideal. But I made it work and just use that time to like learn a little bit more about the job and train and do things and do what I could. But from a priority standpoint, I was able to manage it.
Yeah, with real estate, when COVID first hit, I don't know if like people know this, but like when COVID first hit and with real estate, we couldn't go into houses. So people were actually buying houses with not actually going in them, which I don't advise. But they were buying houses based off of photos, which I think is terrifying. And then it gradually went into only your clients could go in the house, and then your realtor could go in after you, but you couldn't go in at the same time. So I mean, but luckily, like, now we can go into houses, we have face masks, we have gloves and stuff, but really, like, I've been more prioritizing, like, my mental health and making sure, because I feel like when you work from home, I feel like you just work more. I don't know, because you're in the same room and you lose track of time and you look out the window and all of a sudden the sun's going down and you're like, how long have I been sitting here for? You didn't take a lunch break. I don't have any children either. So, like, props to all of you parents out there that are doing this, because I'm struggling with just myself. But like, I get so lost into work that I don't take walks, or I don't even like really take a lunch break. And I just like, so I've been really trying to be conscious of like, okay, like we worked 3 hours, let's, take 15 minutes and walk around the cul-de-sac or whatever. So.
Great. Yeah, really important. Okay. We've got a question from Adeline, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm going to have the read in a little bit before the question. She said, some people may not understand that change is not a bad thing, and being a perfectionist may be the reason why they don't take action toward their dreams and goals. So her question is, how do you come to the realization that you have to change something about yourself? Who wants to take that first?
That's a great question. For me, to be totally honest, I knew I needed to officially make a change. I knew it's like, sometimes, internally something's not right, but you're not willing to admit it, or you just don't want to address it. And that was me. It wasn't until other people started noticing, and someone close to me, just kind of like your circle of influence, and they kind of just came up to me and they say, hey, listen, are you okay? Because you don't seem okay. And that's when I'm like, oh, wow, this is clear. But I mean, I feel like we know and we just sometimes don't want to acknowledge it, or we just don't know what direction to take, or it scares us. And sometimes we feel like if something scares us, then it's bad. And that's not the case. A lot of the times, anything that scares us that we go after, we're growing. And, we always somehow manage to land on our feet. So I hope that answered your question.
I think for me, I'll share like the toughest feedback I ever got. And I was my senior year of college, and I was in a business honors program, and the dean of the business school, I had just done really poorly on some mock interviews with real companies. And having been a classic overachiever, I got a D, which was really, really tough for me. And he said the interviews were terrible because I was not engaging. I gave one-word answers. I was just essentially really shy. And he said, you need to change your personality. And as a young college kid, I definitely went back to the car and cried a lot. And, but after that settled in, after a few days, I was like, he's right. If I want to be successful, I need to be more outgoing and I need to be less shy, because it's going to be hard to engage with people if they feel like I'm too scared to talk to them. So I think it's not always thinking that you're operating like, you know, like if someone's giving you feedback, it's because they care. It might not feel that way. So I always try to give credit and listen to them. Sometimes I accept it, sometimes I don't, but I at least spend some time and think about it. And that's when I knew I had to change. So that was, I really feel like he was the reason why I'm here today, because he totally changed my personality.
I mean, that's some big criticism.
It was.
Constructive criticism. Yeah, dang. I don't know how I would have taken that. I feel, especially as a senior in college, goodness. All right, we've got one question, slightly similar, but a little different, from Nancy Martin. Hey, Nancy. How did you know when it was time to try something new? When did something internally kind of poke its head and say, hey, maybe let's do something different?
Similar to I can get bored very, very easily. But sometimes for us, it takes us like a big event to realize like maybe how precious life is. And I'm not trying to get in too deep here. It's just like, for me, for example, it was the passing of my mom when I was younger. And I was like, whoa, life's really short. You know, she passed suddenly. And I was like, I need to make sure that I'm living to the fullest, because she had a lot of what ifs and if only, and I wish I could have. And it was just like, I don't want to say that, you know? So I think for me, it was just, that was a big eye opener. And I just wanted to just always go after what I wanted. So when I realized I wanted to work for myself and figuring that out, but for me, it was definitely that big event. But then it's kind of addicting once you start making changes and you realize like you're in full power and you can totally do this. Like, you totally got this. It's kind of addicting to keep trying new things and, you know, and just going with your gut and just saying, well, let's give this a whirl and see what happens. So.
I know for me, the seed had been planted by a former boss of mine at ACO, and he was someone I really, really respected. One of the most smartest, most humble people I've ever met. And he said, maybe you should think about becoming an advisor. And I literally had never thought about it before. You know, I'm a background in HR. But I took what he said to heart. I was super flattered, but I also just started paying attention and just started talking to other advisors and started really considering, is this something that maybe I can do and pursue? And for me, there was like kind of two things that really drew me to it, like the total technical aspect of it, learning something so new and foreign to me, felt like a really cool challenge to take on. And then second, to show that, you know, someone without like necessarily a background in finance could come in and do the role and hopefully successfully one day. But I kind of love feeling like kind of proving to people that I can do something that maybe they hadn't thought that I could do before. So
that's great. Yeah. And there's a question that I'm curious about, because all of us are a little younger in the career spectrum for sure. And for younger generations, some of the older generations might see multiple career shifts in a short amount of time as kind of flip, or we can't make up our minds, or something like that. So I'd love to hear each of your responses to that.
I can start. So for me, you know, I've left jobs because the culture wasn't great, or, you know, I left my job at Target because I was working some crazy hours and I had my daughter, and I needed like just a really normal work schedule where I could be more balanced. So that was a very intentional shift. And I stayed there for 7 years while she was young. And then when she was a little older, I thought, okay, it's time that I could spend a little bit more time focused on my career. And I've left jobs because, you know, it was a really toxic work environment. And I said, I can't sustain this anymore. Or I've left jobs because another opportunity looked really exciting. So I think, you know, I always told people in my previous HR role, don't be scared to leave. You never know what it's like. I think it's only helpful to work in different organizations, work in different cultures, work with different types of people, it only helps you grow. Versus, I think it's wonderful when people stay like their entire career in an organization, but sometimes that can create a grass is greener. And I, you know, having worked in different types of organizations, I think it's been wonderful for me from a growth perspective, and just in understanding that every organization has its issues, and no organization is perfect, and just being like, what can you work with? So.
Yeah, Emily, how about you?
You broke up a little bit, but did you ask why we left other jobs? Was that the overall question?
It was so with younger generations, having multiple jobs in a shorter span might be seen as flip, or we can't make up our minds. So I was curious what your response would be for that.
I feel like, especially young professionals, we're kind of like on this tightrope. And it's tricky. It's a tough balance because, to your point, Sarah, it's like if we try too many jobs, then I've had people say this to me, like, oh, people are going to judge you and they're going to start questioning why you're going to so many. And then there's the other side where people are like, no, like you have to try new things, especially when you're young. So that's like, well, what do I do? And admittedly, I've actually worked for, my only job that like was, you know, I left was because it's when I was selling products in Florida. I was selling Tupperware at the time, and I was, and I was sick, and my boss told me she was disappointed in me for taking the day off, but I'd never taken but other than that, I've been fortunate for working with really great companies. Nothing wrong with management. I had a good boss. It's just something within me wasn't satisfied. So I guess, you know, and sometimes that makes it harder to leave because they ask you, you know, why don't you want to stay with us? And then you're like, there's nothing that you guys did. It's just, I'm not happy here. And sometimes that's really hard to explain to people. But that's been like my main thing. It's just, there's something that just wasn't satisfied throughout my day. You know, it's not that it's just, there was just something missing. So that's why I would just keep looking. And, you know, eventually I found the right fit.
Great. Okay. I think, go ahead, Cindy.
From moving from like different jobs and everything, and I say like a solid year is a pretty good time to like stay in a job and like leave and, you know, not look like you're flaky, but it also helps you kind of figure out what you don't like doing. So, and that's just as important. So in every role I've figured that out, and it gets you to a different place. So I do think people should keep that in mind.
Hey, and we also had a comment from Margot just now about we don't ask that question on happiness enough. So how do you give back to the community and support social equity in your profession? So how do you give back?
Can I tell you?
Which is kind of a big question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if people know about this. There's like the really cute thing you can do right now, and like just like giving back to the community. Some people are really lonely right now. One of that is actually elderly homes. So you can actually be pen pals with people in elderly homes. And if you don't do it, I highly recommend it. It's actually a lot of fun. I can give you like names of places, and they give you like, they send you a picture of they don't send you, excuse me, social media. They'll post a picture of them and what they're interested in. So like there's Hilda, and she likes to dance, read, and do community service. And I'm like, Hilda, me too. So I wrote her. You know, and that's just, it's something that maybe you don't really think about. Like, I don't have any grandparents, but there's plenty of people out there that have been inside since March and haven't been able to see their families. So I got to plug that in there because I've loved it.
That's so sweet. I love that. Cindy, how about you? How do you give back in your profession? So I'm really lucky because ACO and Goldman Sachs they're incredibly involved and like really think it's important for their employees to give back. And so it definitely falls in line with how I feel personally. And so, during shutdown, like Emily, but I was actually I spoke on the phone with seniors every week that were lonely. So they provide lots of different opportunities for you to kind of give back. And I know even just little things for me, like in my organization for newer hires, especially from other countries, I would spend time helping them with their English and everything. So those things as a child of immigrants, that felt really personal to me and important. So I think that's a great question because that's absolutely part of kind of how I operate in the world. And that's one of the reasons why I love my organization as well. So.
That's wonderful. Well, great. Well, Cindy and Emily, thank you both so much for your time, sharing your stories and your personal experiences. I'm going to give you a round of applause.